Hey there, Internet. So I took a chance and bought an off-label sewing machine servo, and this one has a badge on it that says EDG backwards E, whatever the heck that is. Because in the picture in the listing it had a label, which is this button here, which is not labeled in English, but it was labeled in English in the picture, that said direction. And because I have one of these mounted to my lathe, it's kind of a pain in the butt. You have to hold one of these buttons down for like 5 seconds, and then you gotta like change the parameter, and then you gotta change the parameter value, and then you gotta hit another button. It's kind of a huge pain in the butt. So I was hopeful that I would just be able to press the button once and the direction on the motor would change. So this was, I don't remember exactly how much it was, but this is brand new out of the box. And I want to show you the quality here of brand new out of the box. Just got it. It's kind of dirty. This is pretty typical. That I don't know if you can see that right here. It looks like there was a rat in there chewing at it. I don't even know what that is. Now I popped the cover off, and it's the same chip. The driver chip is the same chip as what's in the Consew version. But one of the big differences here is that the heatsink on this one is on the side. So they have all the MOSFETs or FETs or whatever they are. They're bolted to this aluminum heatsink. And the heatsink, I would say, is about 2 inches tall and 4 inches long. And I'll show you why that's a problem in 1 minute. I haven't popped the cover off of this thing yet. It's either an optical or a Hall effect sensor that's mounted on this little spring with this little bit of motion, and this is what sets your throttle. You can pop the spring off of this and set it, and it'll hold the speed. You can also try to figure out how to feed this with a CNC controller, which is not something I'm going to get into in this video. The motor, I just put a bearing puller on here and pulled this off, so you can see there's voids in the casting here for this pulley. It's low quality. That's not me. I don't know where that might be from the nut that sat down on there. The pulley, I mean, that looks okay. It's a bit chewy. It's keyed, which is good. It's just like the Consew. But the really big problem, or the big difference in this one that I didn't really notice when I placed my order, was the motor casing is very different. I'll show you the Consew in a second. The fan is pretty compact, and I've run it, and it sounds pretty quiet. It sounds pretty good. It stops quickly. I haven't really tested the torque of it yet. So it operates just like the Consew, but let's walk over here. I'll show you the Consew. I just moved, so this isn't really mounted the way I want it. But one of the things I'll show right away is that the heatsink on the Consew, the MOSFETs are mounted in a completely different orientation, and so maybe you can even see. You see these little screws. These little screws are where the MOSFETs are being screwed to this much larger surface. And if I were to guess, I would say that this is going to be a much more efficient way to cool the unit down. Now, both of these units have a plug on the back, and when you turn on the switch on the front, there's a relay inside, and it turns on this. And the way I'm using it's intended for a light, but the way that I'm using it is with this big 200 millimeter fan that I have running at like 7 volts. So it's pretty much silent, but it gets a good amount of airflow on the heatsink, and it runs nice and cool. There's really no heat that gets built up whatsoever if this fan is running. If I don't run the fan, it gets very, very warm to the touch. I'd say it gets 60 or 70 degrees Celsius. And For the other one that I just bought, I'm a little bit worried about the amount of surface area there is. Now the motor is also going to get hot, and so what they've done with this Consew version is a couple interesting things. The first thing is the motor case is a heatsink. So this gets the heat out of the motor, which is good for the life of the motor. But they've also integrated into that heatsink these mounting brackets, and so this bracket here can slide back and forth or be repositioned. So I could do right now. I've kind of got it hacked on here just to the banjo of the lathe. This works well enough for what I'm doing. But I'd say the casing on this is a much better quality. And then if you look at the size of the motor, I'll just go ahead and measure the body of the motor. So, it's about 3.5 inches. We'll just quickly walk back over here. This one's like half size. This one's about 1 3/4 inches. Your fan is taking up a bunch of that real estate. So if I just look at the between where the screws on the top plate and the bottom plate are, that's 1 3/4. So this thing it says it's rated at 750 watts. What I think is really happening is the controller is rated at 750 watts, and the motor, it's unmarked. There's a 2 on it. I can't see any other markings on the motor, and it just by weight, it's got some heft to it. By weight, I just can't imagine this is a 750 watt motor. Maybe it produces that much torque. I mean, it is wide, and that is good for torque production in a motor. There's a very sticky detent, so when I turn this by hand, it really sticks. So, and the detent's pretty small. I don't know if you can see that, but that's one jump there. And there's probably some pretty strong magnets in here. If these magnets are neodymium magnets, then the cooling becomes that much more important, because the thing about neodymium magnets is the Curie temperature, or the temperature at which they start to lose their magnetism, is much lower than other kinds of magnets. And that's why that's why this fan is integrated in here, and that's why you want to actually, the aluminum casing on it helps to sink the heat away, which is definitely something that you want. So, if I were to suspect about life just on the design of this motor body, I would say the Consew design is definitely going to have a longer life. It's probably got a better overall duty cycle. Maybe for short runs this would be okay. But I forget what I paid for this. I'll have to look it up and put it up on the screen here. But if I were to do it again, it's really not worth it for this little button. The other thing I was hoping if I bought this is it was the same controller board, and I could figure out if there was a pin that I could use to set the direction. But that's not obvious from the controller board. The input, if I can show you the input wires here, there's really only 3 of these are used. So one's going to be the power, one's going to be the ground, or the neutral, not neutral, it's ground, and one of them is going to be the signal from whatever kind of sensor's in here. I don't know what these other pins are for. There's 3 more pins. This is for what's called a position sensor. When you're sewing, it tells you where the needle is, and so you can try to have it stop in the down needle position or the up needle position. Obviously for a lathe, I don't need to use that. So I don't know. All these pins should be being used. There's 2 that aren't used, but what you have in here is you have the 3 phases of the motor, the brushless motor, and then you've got a power and a ground, and that powers whatever kind of sensoring is in the motor, inside this motor body. I don't even have to take it apart because this is just how they work. There's probably a circuit board, and on the circuit board is probably a Hall sensor, and so that those Hall sensor readings, this powers the circuit board, probably the red one, and then these other three are feeding Hall position data back to the controller on the board, and that's how the controller knows how to set the polarity of the magnets inside on the three different phases. So anyway, I'm pretty disappointed. I would have to say that the Consew 3000 is is going to be a much better performing motor, even though I haven't really tested this on the lathe yet. I might not even put it on the lathe. I think it's a better value overall. I think it's got better life. I think the quality of everything is better, the heatsink and everything else. So hopefully that helps inform your choice if you're looking to use one of these sewing machine servo motors for a different application. Anyway, thanks for watching.